If you are a parent or grandparent, you know that talking with children about drugs is a really tough subject. We have with us someone tonight, someone that can help guide us through that very difficult discussion. Dr. Cindy Graham is the owner and founder of the Brighter Hope Wellness Center in Clarksville and a licensed clinical psychologist. Dr. Graham has over 20 years of experience working with children, teens, and adults with anxiety, mood, inattention, hyperactivity, and impulse control issues. And thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Graham. How are you?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
First question, what should one do if they suspect their child is taking drugs?
Sure. So the first thing to do is to open up lines of communication. One of the most important things with kids of any age, but particularly kids who might be at risk for using drugs, would be to make sure that you and your children feel comfortable talking to each other. You don't want to go to them with an accusatory tone. You want to go to them with concern and compassion, to ask them, what's going on in their lives. Ask them what are the types of, what are the types of things that they're interested in, and really have a frank conversation about drugs and what drugs can do to you, on the negative side of things and the long-term consequences of it.
What should someone do if they find drugs in their child's room, besides becoming very upset, of course? What should they do about that?
Right. So in that case, education becomes really important for your child. As you mentioned, of course, it's natural for a parent or a caregiver to feel very upset, but what becomes critical is to not confront your child in an angry or upset kind of way. Make sure that you're calm, that you're feeling like you're able to carry on the conversation without it escalating. You want to make sure before you talk to them that you are educated in terms of, what the drugs are. If you found drug paraphernalia in their room, look it up, investigate, see what they're into, and then talk to them about drugs. Get to know who their friends are as well. Get to the root of the issue. Get to the root of, what are the behaviors, what are the things that your child is struggling with that might be leading them to use drugs, and have that conversation from there.
And if you believe your child is stealing from your family to support a drug habit, how do you handle that?
Right, that's a particularly tough one, because that's something that can even more so lead parents to feel very angry and upset, even betrayed and hurt. One of the important things for parents and caregivers to keep in mind is that addiction is a mental illness. It's something that people struggle with, and that teens struggle with even more as their brains are developing and they're trying to make the right choices and figure out their ways in life. So if you find that your child is stealing, again, try to approach them with a very calm demeanor, have an open and frank conversation, talk about the underlying issues. Of course, address the fact that they're stealing in order to perpetuate this drug habit, but talk to them about how you can help them to get help, about taking them to a mental health professional such as myself. If that's not something that they're comfortable with, you can seek help through the school, through community services, which I know we have on this program. There are going to be people talking about that as well. So there are lots of ways to address the stealing, and really it's the underlying behaviors, and even the fear of going to you openly with with this addiction that becomes important.
What do you do if you believe your child is an addict, but they won't admit to it and they won't get any help? I mean, that's so
Right.
helpless, right? So what do you do about that?
Yeah, and so there's often a lot of shame, a lot of regret, a lot of negative feelings that kids can feel for turning to drugs and using drugs. So it's really quite natural for them to not want to admit it. They might be in fear of getting in trouble. So you really want to create a very safe space for them. You want to communicate the fact how much you love them and how much really your concern is, what this is going to lead for them. If you yourself have had a history of drug use, or family members that would be a great opportunity to communicate to them that this is something that is a family struggle, that is genetic, that is even environmental, and that can help to kind of ease some of the fears that your child may have about, admitting to it, and then really seek the services that your child may need in order to get past their addiction.
Piggybacking off of that, we've heard that ACE, or adverse child events, can be factors that lead kids and teens to use drugs. So what are adverse child events, and how can this problem be addressed?
Sure. So adverse childhood events are about 10 different categories that we look at that put a child at risk for trauma, an individual in trauma later on in their life. So they include everything from abuse, including sexual, mental, emotional, neglect, a history of drug use within the family, violence within the home, various other factors like that. And so what we found is that for individuals who have any of the ACE risk factors, that they can be anywhere from 2 to 10 times as likely to have a substance use disorder compared to someone who doesn't have any. And the more ACEs that you have, the higher that risk goes. That's where it puts you at like 10 times the risk. So what this means is that we really need a lot of support on a family level, on a community level, to make sure that families have the support that they need so that they're not more likely to be victims of abuse or violence, to have a family member that's incarcerated, to struggle with income. These are all things that can predispose somebody or make it more likely for them to engage in drug use.
What if it's not your child, but your child's friend who is using drugs and you don't know the
Right.
parents? Is there anything you can do to help?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the first line of defense, if you don't feel comfortable talking to the child, is to go to the school. Other community networks that you might have or that they're a part of. If this is a child that you know pretty well, especially if well enough to see that they engage in drugs, go ahead and talk to them. Convey to them all of the same things that you would convey to your own child, how you are concerned for their, for their well-being, that, have a discussion with them about the consequences of drugs and help them to find the resources that they may need. Lastly, it could be a really great opportunity to get to know their parents, to reach out to the parents and to, don't lead in with, hey, I think your child is using drugs, but start to open that door to have a conversation with the parents so that you do feel comfortable with informing them that you suspect that their child may be using drugs.
It's that takes a village thing, right?
It does,
Yeah.
it does.
All right, Dr. Graham, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insight and your expertise. Up next, help is out there for families caught up in the opioid epidemic. We'll run down those local resources when our special edition of 11 TV Hill continues. Stay with us.